the U.S. won the war, winners write history. Wars are really bad to women, but they're even worse to young men. There is a connection here, right? I mean, this is it's a conspiracy story that happens to be true. My advice to the Japanese government is never apologize for something that's not true.
Diagwit, we're joined today by Professor J. Mark Ramseyer of Harvard Law School. He's a leading scholar on Japanese law and legal history. He's also famous for his work on the controversial issue of the so-called comfort women issue. That is, women who were involved in the military brothel system across Asia during the Second World War. His work analyzes the contractual and legal aspects of that issue, which has been the subject of much intense international debate. So, Professor Ramseyer, thank you for hosting us here today in your incredible mountain retreat in the Nagano Mountains.
You're welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to ask you today was about your most recent work, your involvement with this book, a rebuttal of a book published by an American historian which alleges that the Imperial Japanese Army between 1927 and 1945 massacred some 30 million civilians. So you've joined a group of scholars to issue a rebuttal to that. So I wanted to get your opinion on why such sensational and unfounded arguments often gain such traction, and how important do you think it is to use historical evidence to argue against them, to issue counter-arguments?
Yeah, it's a wildly distorted book. It's sort of not terribly surprising that books like this would arrive once in a while. The U.S. fought Japan for 5 years, and so when countries fight, they say all kinds of strange things about the other party. And given that the U.S. won the war, winners write history, and so a lot got written that reflects the general American attitudes towards the war, particularly in the first few decades after the war, I guess. But Mr. Rigg doesn't read Japanese, and so what you've got is a collection of the most sensational, wildly biased statements about an enemy country in combat that you could collect. And so, if there's 5 years of war and 5 years of really hostile writing about the other side, it's not terribly surprising that somebody who can't read anything other than English would manage to put together something as unhinged as this book is. How it's sort of hard to tell how determined one should be to respond to books like this. There are a lot of books written in this, both in Japan and in the U.S., and most of them never sell. Right? I mean, the vast majority of my books have not sold more than 1,000 copies or 2,000, perhaps. Certainly, if we thought that people were going to take this book seriously, we should throw everything. We, as in scholars and people interested in the relationship between the two countries and in history and in intellectual integrity and so forth. Should do a lot with it. If instead it's going to disappear in 6 months, then less needs to be done. But at this point, it's hard to know.
So you've joined some 19 other experts in compiling this rebuttal book. What sort of influence do you hope that this book will have, perhaps in counteracting or rectifying some of these misconceptions that propagated by Riggs's book? And just on the point you were saying, like as a book, and with the sort of decline in the number of people reading books, especially academic books, do you think perhaps maybe a different approach, like use like YouTube or something like that, would perhaps be more effective?
Oh, I don't know if we need to decide which is more effective. There's no reason one can't do YouTube and books, I would think.
So what kind of influence do you hope that the book will have, perhaps, in countering
I mean, it would be nice if people would look at it and say, well, boy, that was a silly book that got written a while ago, and then nothing more happens than that. I think Professor Fujioka is putting together has already put together a book in Japanese and is thinking about putting on a English version of the book. They would have different effects. Putting it out in Japan reminds people in Japan who read that people in other countries are still saying crazy things about Japan. And it's sort of surprising that after 70 years of very good relations, that books like this would still appear, but then maybe not. There are a lot of people in this world, and they say lots of crazy things. In the United States, it's a little trickier, because to the extent that people believe this, then we have a serious problem.
So on that point, you've noted in the past that the US perception of Japan in particular tends to be shallow, in part due to the disproportionate number of Korean scholars in US universities versus Japan specialists. So how do you think that imbalance has affected the Western perception of Japan, and what do you think can be done to create a more sort of balanced or nuanced understanding of wartime Japan?
There are many Korean scholars or Korean American scholars in the U.S. They don't work for the most part on mid 20th century history, so it's not that. It's but fringe left groups in South Korea have adopted the comfort women sex slave story as a political tactic in the last 50 years. And so young Korean and Korean American scholars who come to the U.S. to study whatever they're hoping to study, whether it's economics or microbiology or whatever, will bring that with them. And so when a scholar, when somebody like me says something that seems to go against this very basic element of this fringe left, as in it's the South Korean body politic is very sharply divided, and so this sex slave story is part of the left half, not part of the general South Korean electorate. But when that gets questioned for people who come from that half of the electorate, then it's not terribly surprising that they would get upset. I can say that in retrospect. At the time, I was shocked. I mean, I had no idea that this was what's going on. The more troubling thing, I think, is the lack of much depth in American studies of Japan. Whether it wouldn't particularly be Korean Americans, they tend not to be in Japanese studies. It's other Americans who've taken a focus on Japan as their interests. And this is troublesome, because 60 years ago, American economists and political scientists, sociologists were studying Japan. And for the most part, I think they were pretty good. And the humanities people were reading Mishima and Kawabata and translating Genji. And they seemed pretty good. What's happened in the U.S. universities over the last 60, 70 years is a gradual collapse of the humanities. Social sciences have taken a less country-specific, more theoretical approach. And so the result has been, I think, it's certainly been a collapse in the number of people working in this. It's been a shift in the approach that they take. At the risk of being unnecessarily controversial, my own instinct is that it's also meant a huge decline in the quality of the scholars. But if anybody watches this asks me, what do I have evidence of this? Nothing beyond a general impression.
Yeah, just on your point about the humanities in Ireland as well, that's something we're definitely seeing too. Like, for example, my father was a professor of Old Irish Law at University College Dublin, but the department was shut down. So, yeah, that's definitely a trend that we're seeing, like in Ireland as well. But going back to the sex slave narrative, you've observed in the past that many left-leaning feminist scholars tend to prefer this sex slave narrative as it fits into this broader understanding of war as being uniquely cruel to women. Why do you think that narrative became so dominant? And what have you found? What are the findings from your research that would sort of counteract that, or what that you could use to argue against that prevailing sort of story?
Yeah, it's I think there are a couple of things going on here. One which is long term, and one which we can hope is a passing fad. I think university professors come from very comfortable upper middle class backgrounds. They are very talented, and the result is they have, I think, no instinctive connection to young women at the very bottom of the economic totem pole. If you are really, really poor and don't have marketable skills, sometimes prostitution is the least bad alternative. And that's been true in history. Women have very, very poor women have chosen to work as prostitutes, deliberately, knowingly, since as long as we have had historical accounts. I think university women don't like to come to terms with this. They don't want to recognize that some very, very poor women rationally choose this as the least bad alternative. I don't see that as changing. But it does mean that when it comes to studying prostitution, there's this very strong instinctive revulsion against it, and I don't think that will change. The other thing that you mentioned is this notion that have to focus on wartime violence against women, and I mean, it's true that women suffer in war, right? I mean, you bomb an apartment building, it kills the men in there, and it kills the women in there, and it kills the kids. Women also get raped in wartime. This, my guess, has been true for as long as we have histories of war. But men get shot, so I mean, it's the men. And in modern war, it tends not to be men who chose this as their least bad alternative. It's there's a draft, and young men are forced into this, and they get sent to the front line and they get shot. So the notion that somehow wars are worse for women than men. I mean, I suppose if we balanced it all out, it's not impossible that that's the conclusion that one would reach. But my instinct would be against it. It'd be that, actually, wars are really bad to women, but they're even worse to young men. And given that, I'm guessing this is a fad that will pass. It's been around now for about 10 years. And 10 years for a fad like this might be about its life course. I was surprised, and yeah, I mean, I was surprised at the intensity of the hostility. There were many petitions that I was a fraud and a generally disastrous human being, and that my article should be retracted and I should be fired and drawn and quartered. One was signed by 30,000 people, which I would love if 3,000 people had read my article. But somehow 30,000 managed to sign some sort of internet petition. But then there was this Feminists Against Ramseyer. It was signed by two Harvard senior female professors. I mean, clearly, like the vast majority of American scholars who are signing these petitions, they have no clue what happened in World War II. I mean, it's totally without any knowledge of what's going on, but they still managed to sign these. But the feminists, essentially what they were saying is that somebody should file these Title IX claim against me. Right? Like what? Right? I mean, Title IX is basically rape and quasi-rape sorts of things, and the notion that full professors would sign a petition that urges people to file totally unfounded, totally made up, bogus claims on these sort of charges struck me as just beyond the pale.
So, some analysts have suggested that sensational accounts like Riggs's book, for example, aren't just poor history that don't engage with primary Japanese sources, but that perhaps they're also being used for political motives in an information war to undermine Japan's reputation. So perhaps not, some secret cabal, but as a general trend. Do you share that opinion? And if so, what do you think the motives might be, and what can or should Japan do to protect the historical record?
Oh, I think to protect the historical record, you have good historians who do good studies, and maybe I mean that's maybe more should be done, but I'm just an academic, and that's to my mind, if people are producing bad scholarship, then you point out as an academic that it's bad scholarship. Whether parts of a country, people, citizens, government should do something more. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I am just a college professor, as it were. The conspiracy theories aren't all. They're not all made up. And sort of working through this comfort women literature, it was, you look at it, and there's this Korean council, and this Korean council is coordinating litigation claims and doing a whole lot to promote the sex slave story. And then it turns out the head of this group is married to a man who served prison time for passing documents to a North Korean spy, and his sister and his sister's husband just served prison time for another spying incident. I mean, there is a connection here, right? I mean, this is it's a conspiracy story that happens to be true. So that was a shocker to me in drilling down on what was going on. Those of us who are scholars, for the most part, the people I know, my friends, people not my friends who I know, we mostly work on whatever it is that strikes our fancy and we think is important, and where we think we can make a contribution. And it's not that somebody approaches us and says, we'd really love it if you did something like this. So it's not a conspiracy in that sense, but certainly what one does can be used by people who have a political agenda. And to the extent that that's done, it's often reprehensible, but on the other hand, this is freedom of expression, right? I mean, there are two very closely related issues: academic freedom and free speech, and they're not entirely the same, but they clearly overlap. And wrong-headed professors writing wrong articles and books are protected by academic freedom. And politically connected groups choosing to use these wrong studies are protected by freedom of speech. That's sort of what democracy is about, and the proper response to it is to point out that this is what they're doing, I think.
So another thing I wanted to ask you about is you've in the past described yourself as an outsider, having grown up in Miyazaki as the son of missionaries and then later moving to America. So has that bicultural perspective sort of influenced how you engage with contentious historical issues? And has it allowed you to identify biases or assumptions that other scholars might overlook?
Oh, that has to be true. In a sense, it's true that everybody who writes things writes them as a product of their background, right? I mean, at that point, it becomes trivial. I was raised in Miyazaki, which is in Kyushu, southernmost island. Miyazaki. I mean, I love Miyazaki, so if anybody watching this video is from Miyazaki, I hope they take this as Ramseyer is proud of his background. Yeah, I grew up there. I went to public schools, and I went to public schools through grade 6, and my Japanese was a lot better than my English. And then I switched out of the Japanese school system at that point and ended up going to a dormitory in Tokyo for an American school called the Christian Academy in Japan. This surely affects what I do. I mean, it gives me a language advantage so that I can read a lot faster than most American scholars of Japan, I think. But it's always had, from the start, I mean, the work I did is sort of characterized as actually, Japanese are just like everybody else. And in the 70s and 80s, in Japan, there was a lot of Nihonjin don, and Japanese are different than everybody else because they're Japanese. And Americans picked up on this, and so they would be saying things like, this is the 80s, Japanese never say no. And I remember the first time I heard this, I thought, what do you mean Japanese never said no? My grade school friends said no to me all the time. Yeah, things are expressed in different ways, but these are human beings are human beings, and it's true. And there's an awful lot of commonality that I think gets lost. And in a sense, I think I like to think that most of what I do fits into this one way or the other. Certainly the comfort women dispute is exactly this, that military organizations generally have wanted, Americans Army has wanted to have brothels next to Army bases because otherwise things get out of hand. Otherwise, you lose control over VD. Otherwise, there was possibly rape.
There was one point in your research, actually, like on that point, the reason for setting up these brothels, you mentioned that in I think it was 1917 to 1919 during the Siberian expedition. One of the reasons they set up these brothels was to stop the spread of venereal disease. Because I think you pointed out that there's a certain garrison, like over the course of 2 years, and there was something like 2,000 cases of venereal disease. I think that's something that gets lost.
Yes, I mean, it is debilitating, particularly something like gonorrhea. It can just knock out huge swaths of your army. So even if you don't want to say that military leadership is ever benevolent, some people would do this, would say that. I mean, just for self-interested reasons. You want brothels that will keep venereal disease in check. You also want brothels where some of the prostitutes are not spies for the other side, right? I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why militaries do this, and given that there is, I think, in general, a sizable cohort of the very, very poor women who choose to do this for the money. There's no reason to set up sex slave stories, right? I mean, and so to say that this sex slave story is bizarre and completely untrue.
So going back to one of your earlier points about academic integrity, you've emphasized many times that about the importance of academic integrity, so that, if somebody disagrees with a certain paper, that, they should write a rebuttal rather than, demand its retraction. So is there any advice you could give to young up-and-coming scholars who want to engage with and research these kind of contentious historical issues, but, they might be a bit worried or afraid about the criticism that would come with that? How can they uphold academic integrity in the face of this kind of backlash?
This is a hard problem.
How did you do it?
This is a hard problem. There are a couple of basic principles. One is that the folks who are trying to shut down positions that they disagree with need to understand that it won't work. They need to understand that those of us who are politically disfavored will fight back, and will fight back hard because we're right and they're wrong, and they shouldn't get away with this. So to tell somebody who finds these topics fascinating and would like to study them, that actually you'll find a lot of hostility, and so maybe you should think about becoming an investment banker instead. That sort of lets the intolerant and basically fraudulent scholars get away with what they're doing. But that said, they also need to understand that they probably can't take the straightforward path. I write about Japanese history. I'm not in a history department. I'm in a law school, right? And there's a difference. Law schools are not as captured. Most law schools are not captured by the bizarre folks that have captured the history departments. And I publish in law journals that also are not captured by the same people. So that's there are options, and I think students need to think about it.
Finally, I wanted to ask you, what do you think Japan and its critics could do to move towards more constructive dialogue rather than staying mired in perpetual history wars, as it were? And also, what do you think about the current sort of mainstream media bias that we're seeing? Like, do you have any sort of expectation of English language media outlets like Japan Forward going forward in that respect?
I would think, yeah, that in America, most of what we thought of as the legacy media have collapsed, and if they're not out of business yet, they'll be out of business soon. It means that there are a lot of Substacks and small niche market publications that have been growing. And this is enormous opportunities for a place like Japan Forward, which is small but is principled and regularly publishes high quality principled articles on a set of focused topics. I would think it's a perfect opportunity. I don't think is sort of in the vast majority of the vast majority of Americans. I don't think have any particular history wars with Japan. The small numbers of academics in the humanities, basically that's it. And that's not a war. The history wars involve South Korea and maybe the PRC. With the South Korea, it's not the South Korean population. It's with the left half of a heavily divided South Korea. This is okay. So, I'm an American citizen. I sort of recoil against giving political advice, but I will anyway, I guess. My advice to the Japanese government is never apologize for something that's not true. Stick to what's true, certainly don't pay anything. This was all negotiated in 1965 in a treaty, and that's the end of it. If the Japanese government thinks Japan did something wrong, and in war, both sides typically do numerous things that are wrong, you apologize for what you did with wrong, but you certainly don't apologize for something you didn't do. I think the South Korean left has been capitalizing on statements that were intended to pacify, mollify, make friendship with South Korea, and it's has not worked out.
Okay, Professor Ramseyer, it's been a pleasure as always. This is Tokyo Outpost with Professor J. Mark Ramseyer. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.